What's up, guys? Good evening and welcome to Roma Theory. A very hectic last few hours. The second I ended yesterday's match reaction, Gasperini didn't speak his decision in front of the microphones. He didn't release any post-game interview, any press conference following yesterday's game because he's mad against the board for the delay of a lot of these signings, potentially some broken promises coming from this summer. I think we have a lot to tackle in today's video because I think the tensions are high. I think the tensions between Massara and Gasperini have been high ever since this summer. And we were good to hide them because we were happy that the season was about to start again. And because the new season was coming, and because we thought we're hyping ourselves up because of the new players that we signed, which then the majority of them ended up being absolute scraps. But the truth is that I think Massara and Gasperini never got along. I think Massara and Gasperini are continuing not to get along because I think one wants to do the transfer window in a way and the other one wants to do the transfer window in another way. And where there is no cohesion, I think with a manager like Gasperini, you will not have results. And that's one of the biggest topics that I want to speak about today. The importance of backing this manager. I have emphasized this a lot, but I don't think the board has made it clear if they want to follow Gasperini and back him 100% and win with him, or leave him stranded like they have done with previous managers as well. But yeah, it's a silence that speaks. It's a silence that, I mean, it's a big paradox, but under all effects, it's a silence which is a very loud silence, because I can understand why he would choose not to speak in front of the cameras post-game, to kind of avoid any question and any entanglement in some weird response, considering the fact that most probably a lot of journalists yesterday evening would have asked him about the transfer window. So I can understand the idea of not speaking, not wanting to entangle yourself, but at the same time, not speaking because you're mad is very loud. Today, apparently, there has been a direct one-on-one between him, Ranieri, and the two Fredkins. Massara wasn't present, apparently because he left for Milan to try and unlock the Raspadori deal. That's what Angelo Mangiante said. But yeah, it's been a very, I would say, hectic last 24 hours around Roma. I think Gasperini isn't happy, and it's not me thinking this, it's the truth. Gasperini isn't happy about this situation, and we know Gasperini well. We pre-announced this even before he became our official manager. If you're not ready to back him, you might as well not appoint him. That's, I think, the easiest thing that we can say from Gasperini. Having analysed Gasperini's past, one of the reasons of his longevity at Atalanta is because there was a willingness to back him. There was a willingness to put his requests at the center of everything and try to back his requests, even through efforts, through, economic efforts, of course. I know that we've got difficulties. Ranieri made it very clear last season when he was our manager that the next few transfer sessions for us are going to be nightmares. They're going to be very restricted, so don't expect to buy a lot of players. And I agree. We knew about this. Gasperini knew about this. But one thing is being restricted and therefore being careful on what you spend and what you buy. Another thing is delaying everything and getting scraps from the Premier League, scraps from all around Europe, giving them to the manager and kind of saying that you've backed him when in fact you haven't backed him. So there needs to be a bigger willingness to go and satisfy his demands. Because I'll say it again, if you're not ready to back him, you might as well sack him. It's very, very easy. If you don't give him what he wants, he won't succeed. He needs backings. You need to follow his requests. Okay, I understand, and I'm very aware of the situation. If he wants 10 players, you probably won't be able to get all 10. You probably manage to get 5 that he really wants, 2 that both of you have agreed on, and maybe 1 that is cheap but that he doesn't want. But the overall backing needs to depend on his side. And this is something that this summer was missing. This is something that I reckon they've promised him in January. And I reckon one of the reasons why he's mad is because it's been 7 days since the transfer window started. He was promised something early and effective ever since the summer window ended. And it's set the 7th of January, probably tomorrow the 8th, and he still has no players. I, with all due respect, will back this manager until the day I die. And I will defend him and say that he has got all the rights to be mad. He's got all the rights to be pissed, and he's got all the rights to hammer the sporting director and this board. My biggest fear here is, I've got a fear. My fear here is that when he continues to hammer and hammer and hammer and hammer and hammer, he will be left alone. Sorry. Let me just put the microphone. Yeah, okay. My big fear here is that we're going to repeat the same mistake as Mourinho. That's my biggest fear. Because Mourinho told you, I remember it very well. It was 20 minutes after the final whistle in that Budapest final. Jose goes in the press conference. And Jose says and lists a few things that it's been almost 3 years since that day, and I'm still not seeing at the club. Okay. My biggest fear here is that we're going to repeat the same and follow the same path with Gasperini. Promises, 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 broken promises, broken promises, broken promises. And then eventually in the long term, that window, that glass will shatter and it's going to cost him. And you're going to put him under the bus all over again, like we've done previously and like it hasn't worked out. I think you might not agree with this statement, but I think Roma need Gasperini more than Gasperini needs Roma. And I think that's a statement that Ranieri knows very well, because Ranieri chose to appoint him. But I think that Ranieri here needs to act very wise and very smart on the behalf of the board and explain to them this statement very carefully. Because I think look, people might not agree. People might not agree. Again, this is my opinion. People might not agree with this statement. But I think deep down, we need him more than he needs us. We need a manager like him. A manager who hammers. A manager who sets expectations high. A manager that, if backed, will succeed. And I'm convinced about this. It's like X equals Y. If you back him properly, this manager will succeed. I'm convinced about this statement, and if it doesn't work out, I can be called a fool. He can be called a fool. But I am convinced that if you properly back him, he will bring you to the right direction. So, having said this, you gave him, as I've said multiple times leading up to the 7th of January, you gave him this summer absolute fodder. Absolute fodder. You gave him 2 players that he really wanted. One of them is Wesley, the other one is Elanawi. Bailey wasn't his pick. Ferguson wasn't his pick. Tsimikas wasn't his pick. Who else? Who else did we sign? Gilardi and Ziolkowski, they have prospect, but it takes time with players like them. So you gave him absolute fodder. You told him that whatever we don't spend in the summer, We will spend in January, don't worry. And I think that's the biggest broken promise up to now that he's very mad about. Because remember, the evidence is there. Go back on Roma's official YouTube channel. Gasperini on deadline day or the following day after deadline day filmed an interview by himself. And he said that the reason why we didn't sign anybody on deadline day or around the days of deadline day is because we don't need players. I don't need players that I really don't want. And that it's better to keep that money, save that money, and reinvest it properly when we have time and when we've decided better on who to spend that money. And that interview is there. That interview is there. He told you in that interview, the reason why we didn't go for that Chelsea guy, Tyreek George, the reason why we didn't go for Dominguez from Bologna, the reason why I chose and I told you don't spend money on that is because you told me, fine, we will spend that money well in January. And I think having said this, I'm not saying that we're not going to, I'm not saying that, again, the transfer window just opened. I'm not saying that we're not going to sign anybody. We still have a good 20 days until the transfer window ends. But he needs them early. There's no need in signing them the 30th of January. Because by the time you sign them the 30th of January, they'll be ready to start by mid-February. By the time they're ready to pick up some form, it's already April, basically, and the season ends. You need them early in. So I think that's the reason he's the most pissed about. One, because up to now, some of the promises that were made to him have been broken, or at least the timings of these promises hasn't been respected. And number two, because there is money to spend. There is money to spend. And you know that there's money to spend because you signed nobody in the summer. You wanted Sancho, you had the money for Sancho. I'm not saying that, with hindsight, thank God we didn't sign Sancho. But to give you an example, you were close on signing that Sancho deal. And then the player said no. But that shows that you have the money to make that investment, which then wasn't made. So you've got that money. Now, okay, in defense to Massara, I'll say if Raspadori continues to say no, it's not his fault. If Gasperini really wants Raspadori, and I can confirm this, Gasperini really wants Raspadori because he's a player that he's always wanted, even at Atalanta. In Massara's defense, the only defense that I can find here is if he continues to say no, but Raspadori is the player that Gasperini really wants, then it will take a bit more time. And in that defense, I say, okay, give it a bit more. If it's his first pick, but he still hasn't unlocked the deal, then give it a few more days to try and unlock it. But we can't be spending, my point here is, we cannot be spending our entire window or entire winter window chasing Raspadori. Let's make this very clear. It's his first pick, absolutely. We'll try and satisfy his first pick request, absolutely. But if in another 3 days that guy doesn't say yes, move on. That's my point. And that's where the plan B needs to come in quickly. That's why the plan B already needs to be there. Because if you don't sign Raspadori, the following day you already sign somebody else. And that's what we get wrong. We fix ourselves on players too much. These players end up saying no. We've got no plan B. It takes us time and days to develop that plan B. And then the transfer window's gone. So, I understand his frustration. I completely understand his frustration. Also because, I understand his frustration because he's never protested and lamented this season. He's never done it. And, people who say that Gasperini only cries have never seen Conte, have never seen the likes of, Conte and those managers. And number two, the only people who say that Gasperini has literally complained and cried from the day he came to now, or like Damiano Erfaina, who are absolute dickheads and don't know shit all about this game. Shit all. Okay? He's never cried. In fact, he's adapted to this group of players and brought them in a position which any other manager would have not brought them in. He's adapted to situations of extremely injury-prone players, never said anything. always said how these players give it his absolute best. And I can't remember one interview from now until yesterday where he protested against the board. He's never done it. So people who say that Gasperini only cries, leave them alone because they don't know what they're speaking about. He didn't say anything throughout the season. Yesterday he was mad because he expects reinforcements, and yesterday was the first moment where I agree he's complained against the board. Then of course what happens inside we don't know. Also, last but not least, I have read, and this is why journalists are terrorists. Of course, what does a journalist do? Gasperini doesn't speak. Gasperini has tensions with Massara. Gasperini is putting pressure on the board. Gasperini needs signings. Gasperini doesn't have a cohesive bond with the sporting director. Journalist, terrorist, the first thing they write yesterday evening after all of this is Gasperini is ready to resign. Gasperini is ready to walk. That's why I say that if you're a journalist who writes these things, you should, shame on you, because you clearly don't use, my reason here is you clearly don't use your brain. You clearly don't use your brain when you analyze situations. Why would a manager walk if he's fourth, if he's earning a 5 million contract at this football club? Number three, he has said multiple times how he needed this motivation jump, and that's the main reason he left Atalanta. Number four, he's repeated in multiple press conferences how he would love to finish his career at Roma and win something here. Number four, did I already mention the salary? I did, 5 million salary. Number five, are you genuinely that stupid to think that Gasperini signed that contract not knowing all of our restrictions that Ranieri has been speaking about since January last year? I mean, come on. I mean, you're absolutely pathetic. You're absolutely pathetic, and shame on you for writing these articles that are only aimed at destabilizing the environment. Only aiming at destabilizing the environment. Because people who say, oh, Gasperini is having arguments with Massara, hopefully he doesn't walk. You should go to I would put people in jail that write this sort of fodder. I really would. Absolute nonsense. Gasperini knows how restricted we are in the transfer window. He knows it better than you. That is not an excuse for not putting pressure on the board, because the timings can be better. This lack of rapidity in transfer deals can be improved, and a better cohesion and connection with the sporting director could probably also bring better benefits as well. So he's not gonna walk. He's absolutely not gonna walk, because why would he walk? Because why would he walk? If you get my point. Okay. Look at our wage bill. All the top earners are not difference makers. You can't extend Cristante and Mancini and then complain we can't afford any good players. I'll speak about this. I'll speak about this Mancini and Cristante contract extension, and then I'll end it because it's been a few days. Mancini and Cristante have basically agreed to a new deal. 2030 is the new deadline. Look, I'll be biased. I think Cristante and Mancini are the last players that you should be mad about in this team, because in a team full of players that get injured the second they touch a ball, Cristante and Mancini are players that grant you an immaculate consistency that every single manager would want in their team. You can like them or not. Absolutely. That's your take. You can think that we've had enough of them. Let him go. It's been too many years of mediocrity. I think people who think that the reason we haven't been a big football club in recent years is Cristante or Mancini's fault, that's another version of me pathetic, because it's not Cristante and Mancini's fault. I would argue, of course, take me biased, because maybe at times I am, so take me with all my limits, of course. But I would argue that there are so many players that need to leave this club before Cristante and Mancini do it. Especially Mancini, because as I said multiple times, not realizing the upgrade that Mancini has had, in my opinion, is just hating him and just judging him on an attitude point of view. The reason that we have one of the best defenses in the league is because of Ndika and Mancini. Full stop. And, of course, the goalkeeper. But you get the point. And the other thing that I say about Cristante is there are days where I absolutely cannot stand Cristante. I can't. And I think that eventually the day that Cristante leaves will come. But I think Cristante is a player that gets too much hate. He gets too much hate. Why is it? I've said this already, but I'll say it again. Why is it that every manager that has had him starts him? Like, there is a reason behind this that us who just watch football games don't comprehend. So, okay, people might like them or not. People can think that they're the problem of Roma. I think specializing and focusing and calling them the problem of this football club is pathetic, because they're not the problem of this football club. In fact, I would say that they're the least of a problem out of all the players that we have, because they play every game and they grant you consistency, something that all the other players don't do. Because apart from Mancini, Cristante, Kone, Sule and Svilar and Ndika when he's here, name me a consistent player who doesn't get injured. You can't, because everybody gets injured. Everybody gets benched for some reason or another. So I think specializing the problem and narrowing the problem down to them is wrong. Do I think that we can get better than Mancini and Cristante? Than Cristante for sure. I keep Mancini in my team every day of the week. Like, every day of the week. I keep Mancini in my team until the day I die, whether you like him or not. Long life to players like Mancini. Can we get better than Cristante? Of course. Absolutely. I absolutely agree. But I think the Cristante hate is too forced. It's too forced. And calling them two and Pellegrini. But Pellegrini, I disagree to a certain extent, because Pellegrini, I think, needs to go way more than Mancini and Cristante. But calling the problem of Roma Mancini and Cristante, for me, is pathetic. Because they're the last problem that we have at this football club. Because they play every game. They play no matter what they have. Something that I think a lot of other players should learn from. But that's my take, of course. They don't. Oh my god, my eye was tweaking. Where could you see Chiesa going if he leaves Liverpool in January? Mancini and Cristante are two absolutely solid players that deserve extensions. They are consistent and ever present. It's a decade where Roma goes with Cristante in the midfield. Consistency that equals to mediocrity, but I'm tired of this debate. The last 8 years speak for yourself. You've said yourself. I like Mancini, he just makes too much. Celic makes half his money, but is better in his position. No, Celic isn't better in his position, mate. Absolutely not. But yeah, right, I'm going to catch you tomorrow. Hopefully, again, I keep on saying this, but with some news to give to this man, with some updates to give to this man. Hit the like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. See you out.